Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, we're studying Swami Vivekananda's talk given in London, Unity in Diversity. Haima reports that we're on page 188 for anyone who needs to know. And before we begin, are there any comments or questions from anyone about what we've read or talked about so far? Please, if there's anything, don't let it go, because it's difficult to build further on a structure that is not sound. So if there is some thought or question that you have, please let's discuss it. Okay. We'll start with this. If I am evil, the whole world is evil to me. That is what the Upanishad says. And the same thing applies to all worlds. If I die and go to heaven, I should find the same. For until I am pure, there is no use going to caves or forests or to Varanasi or to heaven. And if I have not polished my mirror, it does not matter where I live. I get the reality just as it is. So it is useless running hither and thither and spending energy in vain, which should be spent only in polishing the mirror. Now let's be clear what the Swami means by polishing the mirror. If you read Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight, you'll find that there is within us a personality that is usually masked by our left mind activity. Her left mind activity was for a time extinguished, and so she was left with the heart and what she finds there. We can attain the same state that she attained by polishing the mirror, that is to say, by doing spiritual practices that sufficiently purify and calm the mind, and we then see what exists in our hearts. The divine presence is there, and it is spiritual practice that is what the Swami means by polishing the mirror. And that's what he means by spending energy, which should be spent only in polishing the mirror. Are there any questions or comments about that? What is meant by polishing the mirror? What is meant by spiritual practice? Anything of this?
Brother Shankara, yesterday you mentioned making friendship with the self. It's almost when we remove all the toxins on ourselves, then we become a good friend to ourselves.
Yes, well, it helps to become your own best friend.
That's
There's no
right.
two ways about
Then we can
it.
become a friend to the world. Yeah, I think that's exactly in a different way he's talking about it.
Well, it's a very elusive thing,
Same reality, right?
becoming our own best friend.
Exactly.
You know, we have to think hard. How would I treat my best friend if that best friend was in the situation that I find myself in?
Mm-hmm.
If we do that, if we truly do that,
Yes.
we will develop a level of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and self-love
Exactly.
that allows us to radiate that out to others.
Definitely. Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Thank you, Jaime. Anything
Brother
else? Yes.
I know I'm not saying that this is what he meant by it, but an interpretation, something that I felt when you were reading, a mirror is a way we see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When he was talking about spiritual practice, or you were saying spiritual practice is cleaning the mirror, I kind of took it to meaning the more spiritual practice I do, the more I get to see my true self.
Amen. Yes, exactly, Frank. Your true self is that which is animating this whole universe that you experience. Each of us has our own universe. And so, yes, you get to see your own true self. That's very well said.
Thank you.
That is the polishing mirror, isn't it? Our spiritual practice polishes the mirror day by day, regularly. That's
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
And we have to be very patient.
Yes.
As Swami Sridharananda would repeat over and over, slowly and slowly, my dears. It happens slowly and slowly. Anything else?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
this is maybe more pertinent for the Monday class. I don't know, you tell me. But I saw this poem by Kabir that sort of talks about the mirror. Should I read it?
No, dear.
Okay.
That's a long poem, and it
Okay.
will take us in several directions.
Okay.
But thank you. Yes, I know the mirror that you're talking about,
Okay.
and it is the pure mirror
Okay.
that does not. But thank you for taking note of that.
Okay.
At the end, if we have time, hold on to that, and at the end, if we have time, we'll take care of that.
Sure. Okay.
Anything else? Okay. The same idea is expressed again. None sees him. None sees his form with the eyes. It is in the mind, in the pure mind, that he is seen. And thus immortality is gained. Pure mind and polished mirror. Pure mind allows us to have access to the mirror, to the clean mirror. Now he speaks to his audience very directly. Those who were at the summer lectures on Raja Yoga will be interested to know that what was taught then was a different kind of yoga. The yoga which we are now considering consists chiefly in controlling the senses. When the senses are held as slaves by the human soul, when they can no longer disturb the mind, then the yogi has reached the goal. And then he starts a quote, when all vain desires of the heart have been given up, then this very mortal becomes immortal, then he becomes one with God, even here. Even here means while embodied. When all the knots of the heart are cut asunder, then the mortal becomes immortal, and he enjoys Brahman here on this earth, nowhere else. So what does it mean, the knots of the heart? Those things that continue to trouble us. And as we practice concentration and meditation, we come face to face with those issues that continue to cause us anxiety, fear, doubt, you name it, whatever your favorite way of distracting yourself is. That's what will appear as what he's talking about, as a knot of the heart. And we all have our favorites. We all have our favorite ways of looking away from the truth. So that's what he means by the knots of the heart are cut asunder. Then the mortal becomes immortal, and he enjoys Brahman here on this earth, nowhere else. Anything to add or ask about what was just said? Okay. A few words ought to be said here. You will generally hear that this Vedanta, this philosophy, and other Eastern systems look only to something beyond, letting go the enjoyments and struggle of this life. This idea is entirely wrong. I'm going to repeat that because this is, we bump into this all the time. A few words ought to be said here. You will generally hear that this Vedanta, this philosophy and other Eastern systems look only to something beyond, letting go the enjoyments and struggle of this life. This idea is entirely wrong. It is only ignorant people who do not know anything of Eastern thought and never had brain enough to understand anything of its real teaching that tell you so. On the contrary, we read in our scriptures that our philosophers do not want to go to other worlds, but depreciate them as places where people weep and laugh for a little while only, and then die. We read in our scriptures that our philosophers do not want to go to other worlds, but depreciate them as places where people weep and laugh for a little while only, and then die. As long as we are weak, we shall have to go through these experiences. But whatever is true is here, and that is the human soul. And this also is insisted upon, that by committing suicide, we cannot escape the inevitable, we cannot evade it. But the right path is hard to find. The Hindu is just as practical as the Western, only we differ in our views of life. The one says, build a good house, let us have good clothes and food, intellectual culture, and so on, for this is the whole of life, and in that he is immensely practical. But the Hindu says, true knowledge of the world means knowledge of the soul, metaphysics, and he wants to enjoy that life. In America, There was a great agnostic, a very noble man, a very good man, and a very fine speaker. He lectured on religion, which he said was of no use. Why bother our heads about other worlds? He employed this simile. We have an orange here, and we want to squeeze all the juice out of it. He employed this simile. We have an orange here, and we want to squeeze all the juice out of it. I met him once and said, I agree with you entirely. I have some fruit, and I too want to squeeze out the juice. Our difference lies in the choice of the fruit. You want an orange, and I prefer a mango. You think it is enough to live here and eat and drink and have a little scientific knowledge, but you have no right to say that that is all, that will suit all tastes. But you have no right to say that that will suit all tastes. Such a conception is nothing to me. If I had only to learn how an apple falls to the ground or how an electric current shakes my nerves, I would commit suicide. I want to understand. I want to understand the heart of things, the very kernel itself. Your study is the manifestation of life. Mine is the life itself. My philosophy says you must know what? You must know that. My philosophy says you must know that and drive out from your mind all thoughts of heaven and hell and other superstitions, even though they exist in the same sense that the world exists. I must know the heart of this life, its very essence, what it is, not only how it works and what are its manifestations. I want the why of everything. I leave the how to children. As one of your countrymen said, when I am smoking a cigarette, if I were to write a book, it would be the science of the cigarette. It is good and great to be scientific. God bless them in their search. But when a man says that is all, he is talking foolishly, not coming to know the raison d'être, the reason for being of life, never studying existence itself. I may argue that all your knowledge is nonsense without a basis. You are studying the manifestations of life, and when I ask you what life is, you say you do not know. You are welcome to your study, but leave me to mine. So that was quite a mouthful. The Swami is constantly pushing back against the materialistic view of life. Constantly pushing back. Are there any comments or questions about what he said and its pushback against that? What the Swami suggests is a superficial view of reality.
Hello, Brother Shankara, this is Rishikesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Rishikesh.
Okay, namaste to everyone. Firstly, while the content itself, we can talk about that, but the tone is something that would be alarming to many. I don't know, you all have been reading a lot of books, but I think the tone comes as a surprise to me, right? I mean, how Swamiji is talking here, kind of the comparison and, but I think I've been reading some other books and I feel that we need to put in the right context. What I mean by that is that that was a time when a lot of these deliberations and discussions would take place with a lot of passion and a lot of back and forth, which might be considered politically incorrect or correct or whatever in today's times. But I think I just wanted to tell my everyone on the call here that maybe that's how we need to look at the tone here and not worry much about the comparisons. This was something that was debate in many different aspects of life, even many topics that was going on between all the intellectuals.
Well, he was speaking to an audience of English people, primarily English women, largely very well educated for women of that time, very well read, and very, but to say that this conversation is limited to that time in any way. The materialistic view is just as prevalent now. If in any sense, it's even more informed by some aspects of science that are highly reductionistic and say that our awareness of the world arises from the brain, that there is no such thing as consciousness as it is spoken of by Swami Vivekananda, this pervasive consciousness that we become aware of when we become sufficiently undistracted, which is what is meant by pure.
That's a great point, Brother Shankar. I think from that perspective, the more the scientific findings happen, the more advancements take place, the more deteriorated or stressed out our life is becoming on the other end.
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
We do seem to miss the point. Now, it isn't that we should dismiss science, anything but we must leave it to its place. And as you just pointed out, many of its so-called advantages or advances have left us with a different kind of suffering, but very intense. Anything else from anyone? Thank you, Rishikesh. Thank you, Rishikesh.
Brother Shankara,
Thank you.
Yes.
Swami said in those days, the Hindu says true knowledge of the world means knowledge of the soul. No longer, even in India, Hindus are thinking knowledge of the soul anymore. It's all materialistic now. Majority of the population is towards materialistic world. And in those days, yes, Swamiji was right. In those days, 120 years ago, it was true. That is how people used to live. Even my parents' times, it was like that. But not anymore in this modern world. It has changed tremendously.
Yes, I'm sure it has. And Swami Vivekananda predicted,
Yes,
prophesied, if you will,
yes,
that this phase would happen after liberation, after India was free from the Raj, that people would be grasping for a better life and would become, for a time, materialistic
yes,
before the nobility of the Indian character and Indian worldview,
exactly.
the Sanatana Dharma, would make itself known again. Sanatana Dharma, for those of you who don't know the term, is the way Aldous Huxley translated. He translated it to mean the perennial philosophy. By the perennial philosophy, he didn't mean it's the only one.
Mhm.
He just meant it is the philosophy that is always existent. And so it will, according to Swami Vivekananda, it will arise again, and India will become a very great culture again, based in its spirituality. But there would be this time, he said, of materialistic, people who had been enslaved for centuries, reaching for a better life, a more successful, materialistic life.
Swamiji is definitely a great debater, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
He's a great debater, and every point is so true. So true. Cannot disagree with him.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
what I feel is that, Haima is right that there is a lot of apparent interest leaning towards materialism. But when I see a lot of the younger people, because of the availability of this knowledge so widely on the media and internet, there's so many youngsters when I go to these Zoom talks, or even in our own group, there's so many of them that are drawn and they are thinking. So I mean, I see that as a very positive. I mean, I don't think when I was in my teens or 20s I ever thought as much as some of the youngsters seem to be pursuing spiritual path these days.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Swayam, and you're right. And it is also true that the Ramakrishna order of monastics is having some difficulty accommodating all of the young men that want to join the Ramakrishna order, that want to become monastics and are apparently quite sincere. So they're struggling to, and have in fact narrowed their requirements, made it more difficult to qualify to join. So both things are happening at once. There's no two ways about it. But India as a culture is surging, in many directions.
I meant higher percentage, Brother Shankara, towards materialistic world.
Yes, of course. There's no one's arguing with you, Jaime. No one's arguing.
I don't mean all. No, there's no such a thing as all and never. So just higher percentage. And
Right.
we are all towards Vedanta. But we have bhakti yoga in India, lots of going to temples and giving, money and donations. But actual essence of Vedanta is missing there.
Well,
God is within our soul is missing. That's what I mean.
Vivekananda said it would rise again.
Yes.
This materialism would surge, and then
It may vanish. Yes, that's right. Thank you.
thank you.
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
I could not understand this one line, and I'm going to read it. Maybe you can. On the contrary, we read in our scriptures that our philosophers do not want to go to the other worlds, but depreciate them as places where people weep and laugh for a little while only and then die.
Oh, he means the various heavens, and for that matter, the various what are called hells. This is heavens and hells are places where people weep for a time, a hell, and the heavens are where people laugh for a time, enjoy themselves for a time, but then they return to human form, and so that's what he means by die. They die to that life and return to human form, or even to animal form if they are sufficiently degraded. This is what's said in the Upanishads, although the Swami doesn't make much of a point of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick point/question to ask. You, Brother Shankar, you always say that there is no line of demarcation between spirit and matter, and I've read some of Vivekananda, and he brilliantly integrates the materialistic perspective into the spiritual perspective, right? Like Aurobindo, there's a brilliant reconciliation between religion and spirituality. I mean, science and spirituality. And I feel like the more we dig into science, the more we realize that the Vedantic perspective is true, you know? So I just wanted to make that point.
Very good. Very good. And yes, you're right. Vivekananda can integrate the two. But he always will say that the philosophy is your ultimate salvation.
I think Swami Sarvapriyananda, I've heard in many of his talks, he talks about how Vedanta, particularly Advaita Vedanta, is, and now I'm using my own words, but studying your own experience. You don't need like instruments and, scientific sort of methodology, but it's your day-to-day experience that you study, and that's like the three states or your five. You study that to get get to the knowledge.
Yes, that's some comments were made to that effect early on this evening. That as we practice concentration and meditation, we find what the Swami referred to as the knots of the heart. And our simply gazing upon them, acknowledging them, and not continuing to indulge in them cuts them asunder. So yes, you're absolutely right, Swami. This is studying our own experience. And we see our own experience most profoundly when we calm the mind through concentration and meditation. We control the senses, and so that they're not outward directed. And we control even the tendency of the mind to recreate sense experience inside the mind when we deny it access to the outside. We control all of that through concentration and practice of meditation. And we begin to see those aspects of ourselves that are impediments to us, that are that which is holding the heart in bondage. That's what means by the knots of the heart. So Sarvapriyananda is absolutely right.
It seems like Vedanta is almost a science of consciousness, though, right? Like
That's
it's
exactly what
very.
Vivekananda says.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can find these statements, perhaps most dramatically made, in the collection of talks published as Inspired Talks, where he talks about. But he compares the practice, our spiritual practices, to chemistry. He says, it is a science. And you do what, particularly in the both the preface and the introduction to Raja Yoga, he talks about the fact that this is a workbook. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are a workbook. You do the things that Patanjali says to do, you get predictable results, just as you do in any other science. So thank you, Anshu, for bringing that up. Yes, it is indeed a science of consciousness.
Brother Shankara, a few questions, but one at a time. The knots of the heart that you were talking about, does that have anything to do with our gunas?
The gunas are what has created everything that we experience, in any way experience. So yes, the knots of the heart are the result of the actions of the gunas, but there's no such things as our gunas. It's just the gunas.
Right.
The gunas result in, they help create certain things within us. And some of these are these habits of mind, habits of attraction, aversion, anger. You spoke very eloquently about them last night, or maybe it was Monday night, about how you discover these things in yourself, and they simply don't work. You see that they don't work, and yet somehow they continue to arise. So the gunas, we can replace that which is tamasic by that which is rajasic consciously. And the instructions are very clear in chapter 2 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras for replacing the lower or tamasic samskaras or knots of the heart with something higher, different experiences. And then practicing those ways of being and thinking that are sattvic, those replace the rajasic. And so we ascend. And this is what is described in some detail as the yamas, the restraints, and the niyamas. So yes, it is the gunas. So that's question one. Good question.
Well, you kind of answered the second one because I was going to ask, is there anything we could do about them? Because I feel like I was dealt a really bad hand of gunas. Like I try to overcome things, but I almost feel like in some ways I'm on automatic pilot, or there's something driving, whether it's my anger, my insecurity, like almost like I observe them and I think I know better, but still I almost seem to be on automatic pilot. So I kind of feel very often frustrated with the gunas I've been dealt with, because a lot of times I don't like who I am and how they made me up. So I was going to ask, is there a way to change them? But you did answer that, and you said there is.
Yes, read particularly Swami Prabhavananda's book, How to Know God. He takes Patanjali's instructions, interprets them, and comments on them in such a way that it's very clear what to do. And it does work. It's the same information that is dealt with in Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. Same exact information. Swamiji deals with it in a certain way that was appropriate to the time and audience that he was addressing. In the 1940s, late 1940s, Swami Prabhavananda found among his disciples that they found it difficult to understand some of what Swami Vivekananda was saying. So he was constantly having to interpret it. So he decided, well, since I'm constantly having to interpret it, let me just write an interpretation. And so he wrote the book, How to Know God. And it is, again, it is just as scientific as a chemistry book. And it will tell us, it does tell us how to replace the lower with the higher. And we were all dealt this world of time, space, and causation created by the gunas. And we all have our challenges and our issues. And we all feel great empathy for what you're saying, Frank, about what you were, as you say, dealt. Is there anything else?
I was going to say, tell Frank.
That's why
Sorry,
I'm just a
sorry.
moment. Was there anything else, Frank?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, Swayam, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to tell Frank that, I mean, I feel the same way. I'm not too thrilled with the combination of gunas that I've been dealt with. But one thing I've realized, or I'm trying to, is that first thing I have to do is accept that I've been dealt these, and then look at the whole thing of where I want to go by spiritual practice. That's why I got drawn to this path. And or after I got into the path is when I realized that first I have to accept that I was dealt these and what I need to grow, where I need to grow.
One very powerful thought is, am I glad of being who I am and what I am right now? And if that's true, then acknowledging that everything that came before, every little thing that came before, no matter how far back you might want to trace it, and it's not a good use of your time to try to trace it, but just accepting whatever it is. Am I glad I am who I am now? And I think all of us would say, we have our issues and our challenges, but look at us. Here we're gathered on a Wednesday night to study Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. So just listen to this little poem. The past, untrue or true as I recall it, what does it matter now? All that became this moment, this crouching, pregnant moment. The past, untrue or true as I recall it, what does it matter now? All that became this moment, this crouching, pregnant moment. So when we focus on what's in this moment, we find that there's tremendous power, there's tremendous momentum. We are an amazing being. That's what we'll talk about this coming Sunday. We are an amazing being. Sri Ramakrishna's Karma Yoga. We are a manifestation of the divine, but it's all fragmented by time, space, and causation. So we accept that. And we think, all right. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. We can make it better. We can make it better. Take a sad song and make it better. That's just a little fragment of the Beatles' Hey Jude. Anything else from anyone before we go on? Okay. That was a good discussion, I feel. That's exactly what we're here to do. So the Swami says, I am very practical in my own way. So the idea that only the West is practical is nonsense. You are practical in one way, and I in another. There are different types of men and minds. If in the East a man is told that he will find out the truth by standing on one leg all his life, he will pursue that method. If in the West men hear that there is a gold mine somewhere in an uncivilized country, thousands will face the dangers there in the hope of getting the gold. And perhaps only one succeeds. The same men have heard that they have souls, but are content to leave the care of them to the church. The first man will not go near the savages. He says it may be dangerous. But if we tell him that on the top of a high mountain lives a wonderful sage who can give him knowledge of the soul, he tries to climb up to him, even if he be killed in the attempt. Both types of men are practical, but the mistake lies in regarding this world as the whole of life. Yours is the vanishing point of enjoyment of the senses. Yours is the vanishing point of enjoyment of the senses. There is nothing permanent in it. It only brings more and more misery, while mine brings eternal peace. I do not say that your view is wrong. You are welcome to it. Great good and blessing come out of it, but do not therefore condemn my view. Mine also is practical in its own way. Let us all work on our own plans. Would to God all of us were equally practical on both sides. I have seen some scientists who were equally practical, both as scientists and as spiritual men. And it is my great hope that in course of time, the whole of humanity will be efficient in the same manner. When a kettle of water is coming to the boil, if you watch the phenomenon, you find first one bubble rising, and then another, and so on, until at last they all join, and a tremendous commotion takes place. This world is very similar. Each individual is like a bubble, and the nations resemble many bubbles. Gradually, these nations are joining, and I am sure the day will come when separation will vanish, and that oneness to which we are all going will become manifest. Mark that phrase. I am sure the day will come when separation will vanish, and that oneness to which we are all going will become manifest. A time must come when every man will be as intensely practical in the scientific world as in the spiritual. And then that oneness, the harmony of oneness, will pervade the whole world. The whole of mankind will become jivan muktas, free while living. That's what free while living. Jiva, that which breathes, free. Free while living. We are all struggling toward that one. And through our jealousies and hatreds, through our love and cooperation. So both, we are all struggling toward that one end, through our jealousies and hatreds, through our love and cooperation. A tremendous stream is flowing toward the ocean, carrying us all along with it. And though, like straws and scraps of paper, we may at times float aimlessly about, in the long run, we are sure to join the ocean of life and bliss. A tremendous stream is flowing toward the ocean, carrying us all along with it. And though, like straws and scraps of paper, we may at times float aimlessly about, in the long run, we are all sure to join the ocean of life and bliss. And that's the end of that talk. So we have a few minutes left. Anything at all about what the Swami said? What moved you? What left you with questions? What do you want? What do you want from what the Swami said?
Brother Shankara, what moved me is the concluding a few lines. Swamiji never spoke an untruth in his life. So that what he says is so um, so motivating, heartwarming that we are all being carried um, towards that ocean. It just fills my heart.
Thank you, Swami. Yes, and that current flows directly through us. It's the manifestation that he was talking about, and the evolution. And right now, there is real opportunity because of the presence of the great ones so recently, there's a great surge in this current carrying us along. So whether you're a board surfer or a body surfer, or one of those belly board surfers, let's all surf on that great surge of spiritual energy that came into the world in the middle of the 19th century. Anything else? Thank you, Swayam.
Yeah, I really resonated with what he said about how how the Eastern path grants eternal peace, whereas the Western path is just a litany of unfulfilled desires. Like, I've tried both paths. Like, growing up, I was an atheist, total American, partied a lot, and I just suffered because of it. Whereas meditation and spirituality and Vivekananda and Ramakrishna especially has given me nothing but peace, so yeah, I just wanted to share that truth.
Yes, if we really want to understand what's available to us that Anshu just spoke about, just go online, find a copy, and if you wish, just send an email to me and I'll send it to you. Breaker of this world's chain. What is available to us? What happened in the middle of the 19th century in 1836 when Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Vivekananda, that whole, as Sri Ramakrishna said, band of minstrels. I'm not saying you have to believe in them or that you should believe in them, but it's worth your attention to have a look at what Vivekananda said, if you like what Vivekananda says. It's Vivekananda who wrote that hymn, Breaker of this World's Chain. There was some sort of chat came on the screen. I couldn't see what it was. What was that?
Cindy put a link to the Breaker of the Worlds chain.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Cindy. It's available to you, so you can download it. Thank you, Sharda. Anybody else? Anything? Well, I'll just say these few words. The title of this talk is Unity in Diversity. And the Swami presented various kinds of thoughts about diversity and manifestation. And he kept returning to the philosophical position that behind all of this appearance, all of this manifestation, all of this time, space, and causation, there is one. There is one. He said of us, of we human beings, we are infinite dreamers, dreaming finite dreams. Infinite dreamers, dreaming finite dreams. When we become aware of the dreamer that we are, and this is done through the practice of contemplation, concentration, and meditation, when we become aware of the witness consciousness within us, and we see that that is the face of the One, then everything that happens in our presence takes on a very different character and no longer feels like a knot of the heart or something that binds us. But the only way, and this isn't just something being said from here, the only way to access that is to faithfully practice. We cannot do it intellectually. We have to practice contemplation, concentration, and meditation. And we have to do it for some time. Because the habits, the things that Frank Badia was speaking of earlier, and the things that we talked about, knots of the heart and so on, they have an energy and a strength of their own. They're the whirlpools in this great current that is carrying us along. So they pull us down. We bob to the surface again. But all of this, as the Swami points out, is carrying us toward the ocean of life and bliss. And life beyond our limited sense or organs of action and our organs of sense can make available to us. There's another level of us, and it's metaphorized as the heart. When we become aware of that heart personality within us, that heart being, it's the same as that witness awareness. So any final comments or thoughts? Anything to add or ask for anyone?
I just want to say that one word, Jivan Muktas, that you can be free while living here, because most religions people are places I go, they all talk about what happens after life. They talk about heaven, hell, whatever is going to be after this life is over.
Mhm.
But like Swamiji is like, it is here, right, and it is right now in time and space, not any other moment or not any other place.
Precisely. And I really encourage each of you who doesn't already have a copy to download that link that Cindy put in the chat section. Download Breaker of This World's Chain and see what it is that Vivekananda tells us that Sri Ramakrishna offers us, because it is on offer. And it's an invitation, not a compulsion, simply an invitation. Reach out your hand and I'll take it, the Master says. And this Sunday we'll talk about what
So it says interpretation by Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood. I take it was written in Bengali originally?
Sanskrit, yes. Yes, it was written. It's Khandana Bhavana. You can hear, if you just Khandana, Khandana, Bhavana, Bhavana, or Bhavana, Bhavana, Khandana Bhavana. Just put that in your YouTube or YouTube window, and you'll come up with probably a group of Ramakrishna order monastics singing it. Very moving. But that Breaker of the World's Chain, Breaker of This World's Chain, is recited each evening at Arati. So if you want to experience it being recited with emphasis, just visit us. The link is there for Arati. Visit us some evening, Monday through Saturday at 7 p.m. And you'll hear it read with expression. Thank you, Brahmadas. Anything else?
This is just an emotional. I mean, there are so many good books and writers, but there's something about Swami Vivekananda's writings that just, I don't have words, but it's just so powerful. That's all I can say. Just he just
Well, he said he was the mouthpiece for Sri Ramakrishna. He spoke for the master. So yes, Swayam, you're right, and it feels. I mean, the master wasn't just there and then. The master was on these pages as we were reading them tonight, because this is Vivekananda saying what he very explicitly wrote in his letters that the master told him to say. Anything else, dear ones? All right. Next week on Wednesday, we'll take up chapter 10. I don't recall what the title is. Somebody have the book open. What's the chapter title?
Freedom of the soul.
Freedom of the Soul, chapter 10, Jnana Yoga. That's what we'll take up next week. Thank you, Haima.
Sure, Brother.
Anything else? Any last thought from anyone? All right, dears.
Oh God, that book really clears many doubts, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
That's an excellent book with such a easy read, very easily described everything. Anybody can understand that, how to know God. Really,
How to know God? Yes. Oh, I now I know what you're talking about. Yes, indeed.
it's
Swami Prabhavananda was an absolutely excellent writer,
yes, exactly. Very nicely written for anyone to understand.
and
Anyone.
he really, as as was said, it has been said by a number of people, but if you can't explain it in plain English, you don't understand it. Well,
That's
Swami Prabhavananda understood it, and so he can explain it to us in plain English. And so I highly recommend that.
yes, it's a very nice book.
It presents the way forward as literally a workbook.
Mm-hmm.
The first 6 limbs of yoga are self-effort, purushakara, self-effort. The last 2, Patanjali says, do the first 6, and then the last 2 are something that happens to
And realizing God after that, then how to know God, those two will go like twins. They're like twin books, pretty much.
you.
If we can understand those two, then we understand the really, really well. It's really nice.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harmo. Anything else from anyone? All right, dear ones. The next opportunity for us to gather will be to study that book, Realizing God, which is this coming Saturday. We're just concluding the Swami's talk, Swami Prabhavananda's talk on mind and its control. And then on Sunday, a talk on Sri Ramakrishna's Karma Yoga, which will be a surprise for you, I think, what he has to say. All right, dears. Until next time, good night, good night. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. Go forward in the Mother's loving and protective embrace. Om Asatoma Satgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amrutangamaya, Abir Moiti. Oh, dearly beloved, lead us from this place of endless change and relentless noise to thine abode of silence and peace. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. Good night.
Good night. Hari Om.
Good night.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Good night. Thank you.